Hey guys, welcome to Wisely Owl. We are on lecture 3 of our course on the introduction to marketing. And today we are moving slightly away from the more theoretical topics and getting into something a bit more practical and hands-on, something which requires a lot of number crunching. And in this one, we also have an exercise planned for you. So there'll be a question at the end of the video, and then if you'd like, put down your answers in the comments and we'll discuss them in the next video. Sounds good? All right, let's start. So what is market analysis? Now, first of all, whenever you are running an organization, especially in the marketing division, when you are in the marketing division, you'll always be asked for a market analysis. Now, what does it mean? Market analysis is the activity of gathering information about conditions that affect the marketplace. Now, why do you need this? So before we get to it, let's talk about what are the components of a market analysis. So you have to look at your market factors, which are the size of your market, the growth, the seasonality, the business cycles, things like these. Seasonality and business cycles are, think of, let's say, notebooks. So notebooks, for example, see a surge in their sales during the April to June time when the new session in schools is starting. So that is seasonality, which is that your product has a higher demand in one particular season as compared to the other. Same goes with business cycles. Business cycles are generally considered to be a bit longer than seasonality, but it's essentially the same thing. Competitive factors are your entry barriers, your bargaining power of your vendors, your competitive rivalry, your threat of substitutes. A lot of you guys might even know this as Porter's five forces. So competitive factors are basically you looking at the environment, scanning what products can substitute you, who are your competitors, what are they fighting on, what you should be fighting on, what do you bring for as value to the customer, and things like that. So because you as a company, until and unless you hold a monopoly, which is like very unlikely in these times, until unless you hold a monopoly, you have to think about your competitors. And this is exactly where your competitive factor analysis comes in when you are doing your market analysis. Third is your environmental factors. Now, in a lot of cases, your competitors might not be doing something, and you will think, you know what, I can do that to create value, but then your socio-political or your legal system will not allow it. Uh, One example could be, let's say, in finance. So none of your companies are doing insider trading. You might think that, you know what, I can do insider trading and make a bit more money than my competitors, but your legal system doesn't allow it. So this is where your environmental factor analysis comes in. And last is a SWOT analysis, which is basically you looking inward at your own company as well as outward. So it is sort of like a combination of all of the factors where you list down what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are your opportunities, what are your threats. Now, one important thing to note over here is that strength and weaknesses are internal factors, which is what's happening to you as a company. What are you good at? What are you not so good at? Whereas opportunities and threats exist in the outside environment. What are the opportunities, which is to say what's a gap in the market that has not been filled yet? And your threats are what are the things that the market or your competitor can do, which can upset your plans. So this is SWOT analysis in very brief. Now, why do you do market analysis? So first of all, no organization has infinite resources to invest towards creating value. You might want to, invest in everything that you see, but you can't really do that because you have a budget, you have shareholders to answer to, and all sorts of things. So because of that, because you do not have infinite amount of resources to invest towards creating value, you have to make that choice. Now, no organization can be diverse or big enough to satisfy every need of the customer. For example, even if you think about conglomerates, which make hundreds of products in like dozens of different categories, even they need things like machine tools. They need things like finance. They need things like capital. They need things like accounting software. So no company can do it all. So therefore, in a situation like that, you have sort of an obligation to invest towards profitable ventures. And this is why market analysis is very important, because market analysis puts you in a better position to make a better decision by giving you access to information that is relevant to your decision making process, which is why market analysis is very important whenever you're trying to launch a new product. Now, what are the different levels of market analysis, to so to say? Now, I'm not saying that you need to complete one level before you have to move to the next. I'm talking about the information and how it exists as a subset. So, for example, there's your macro environment, which is what's the economic status of your country right now. For example, if there's very high inflation and people are really struggling economically, then starting a luxury watches brand is not going to be your best bet, especially if you're trying to compete in that market. So this is what your economic conditions are. And similarly, you have your social conditions, your technological, your demographic, your cultural, your political, legal. So all of these things, they define what your environment is like, and that is something that you definitely have to consider whenever you are getting into market analysis. Within that is your immediate environment. Now, let's say you are a firm which makes cell phones. Now, what a firm which is, let's say, manufacturing cars is doing is not really your concern, because you have to compete in the cell phone market. Now, if you want to, like, tie up with that car to create a customized edition or do some branding or licensing or things like that, that is a different issue. But until unless you get into that, when you are talking about the immediate environment, if you're a cell phone manufacturer, you need to look at your cell phone manufacturers, you need to look at your service providers, you need to look at your network operators, things like that, which is your immediate environment, which is your company, your own company, your competition, and your corporate partners. So, for example, let's say you're an FMCG which makes biscuits. So for biscuits, you have to source that flour from somewhere, some farm, or you grow your own or whatever. So if you are getting it from farmers in, one particular Indian state, and you're getting it from there, then these farmers become your corporate partners in your immediate environment. And then lastly, of course, are your customers, the people who essentially in the end will be buying your product. Now, we have so far talked about market analysis. Now, let's talk about a very key aspect of market analysis, which is market potential analysis. Now, how are the two different? Market analysis is you surveying the market to get an understanding of what the market is like, and what you should be doing in order to make a successful product. Market potential analysis is you trying to estimate how much sales will you be getting. So this could be in terms of, dollar value. This could be in terms of number of units. For example, you estimate that, what, given the current market analysis that I have done, I can sell maybe 20,000 units. So that becomes your market potential analysis. Now, there are levels in this, and these levels again are contained within each other. So first is your universe, which is, literally what it sounds like, the universe, everything that exists. However, let's say you are creating a cell phone. So your market for cell phone are going to be people who are looking to buy a cell phone, not for people who already have just bought a cell phone a month ago and are not looking to change. So people who are looking to buy a cell phone, that is your market potential. Whereas people who have a cell phone, people who don't want a cell phone, whatever that might be, that's the universe. Within that universe exists your subset of your market potential, which is people who might want to buy a cell phone. Within market potential exists sales potential. Now, let's say you are a premium brand, your phones sell for about, let's say, 50,000 rupees. So then not everyone is going to buy your phone because it's out of the reach for a lot of people. Or in fact, a lot of times people might not even be looking to invest that much into getting a phone. So in that case, the people who would be willing to buy, who have the capacity as well as the intention to buy, what we have talked about in an earlier video, go and check it out if you want. So people who have the capacity as well as the intention to buy it, that becomes your sales potential. That, okay, in this market of, let's say, X billion dollars, my sales potential is, let's say, $200 million, because that's the segment of the market that has the capacity as well as the intention to buy the product that I'm offering. Now, how do you do sales potential estimation? Now, this is, there's a reason why this is such a important topic, because there are a lot of processes, but no process guarantees you a correct estimation. You can take at best a good guess, but that guess could go either ways, and there's nothing you can do about it. At most, what you can do about is that you follow the standard industry practices, you follow the steps that have been prescribed by people who do sales potential analysis, and then on the basis of that, you come up with a guess which you can defend. So how do you do this? First of all, you start off with your customer analysis. Now, there are a few steps of this. This is not an exhaustive list, but what it basically means is that you go and you understand your customer. Who is the buyer? Who's the user? Now, why do I differentiate between the two? For example, let's say nappies, nappies for children. Now, in that case, the buyer might be a parent, a mother or a father, but the user is a child. So the way you sell that particular product as compared to, let's say, a shirt where the user is the buyer, these two becomes very different, and therefore your customer analysis should give you different answers in these two cases, because the buyer and the users are different. What is the demographic profile? In this case, when you go in, when you are doing your sales potential analysis, you understand that is there a pattern within the people who buy your product. For example, I'm selling a premium smartphone. in that case, what you have to do is, think about what other products or what other brands do these people buy, and then try and see if you can find a commonality between those brands and yourself to make your product a bit more palatable to them. Or it could be a lot of things. It could be gender, it could be an ideological profile, it could be a psychographic profile, it could be n number of things that you can look at. And then what are the buying habits, which is sort of a subset of the demographic profile. Then you identify the market factors, as we have talked about in the market analysis part, so I'm not going to go over the whole thing again. Surveying of buyer intentions, which is like, going to the market and talking to the customers or talking to potential customers, getting their feedback about what features would they like in a product. Is there a particular problem that they are facing that they would like solved, and what amount would they be willing to pay to have that problem solved, things like that. And last is testing markets, which is basically you release your product or you release your service for a small area first, let's say a city or a state or a region. And if it performs well there, then you scale it up to different areas. Now, what happens in this is that, if you can find a test market which is in terms of its distribution similar to your entire market. For example, you find a state within the country which has the same proportion of population as the rest of the country, then that will give you a good enough idea that if you scale this product up and take it to the national level, how many sales will you achieve. Now, what are your tools of estimation? So first is your market factor analysis, which is basically, you the demand for a product is assumed to be related to the behavior of a certain sales activity, which is basically to say that I know that if my salesperson makes 200 calls, he usually gets 30, he usually closes 30 of them. So this is your first market factor analysis, where you know that certain sales activities are linked to n number of sales. Now this again, this comes from looking at your data, which is why data is becoming such an important thing these days. But this comes from looking at your data, this comes from your experience, and then from from the execution of certain selling behaviors, just decide that okay, this is what the demand for the product, and then the final sales of the product are going to be. Survey of buyer intentions, we have talked about it. Test marketing, we have talked about it. Post sale and trend analysis, again, data crunching. You look at your past numbers, you try and find out a trend, you find out a regression equation, and then use that to predict what or how the market is going to behave. Sales for composite is basically it's the opposite of a trend analysis. In this, what you do is you go down to your salesperson, you ask him, look, tell me how many units can you sell in your territory. Then you take up all of these numbers and you aggregate them, you add them up together, and that gives you a fair enough idea that okay, fine, from the ground level, this is what the salespeople are telling me. Now there is one pitfall to using this. A lot of the times salespeople work on targets and quotas. So if there's a low enough, if they are at an advantage with a low enough target, so there might be a tendency in some salespeople to misreport the numbers and give you a lower number that is actually, realistic. So this is why this tool is used with a lot of caution when it comes to, making sales estimation decisions. And then executive judgment, which is the opposite of Salesforce composite, where the where the top management decides that, what, I think we can achieve 5 lakh units of product X. And then they, that target is broken down and given to the salespeople. So it's a top-down process rather than a bottom-up process. So let's talk about sales forecast now. Sales forecast is an estimate of probable sales of one company's brand or product or whatever that might be. Now there are certain guidelines to it. However, they are not very set in stone. You can choose to break them given the conditions that you're operating in and what product are you trying to sell. Sell, for example, let's say the covering of 1 year period. For example, if you're working in a B2B heavy machinery kind of an industry, then you might break this and go for a longer period of time. Or if you're working in, let's say softwares, you might break it down to a shorter period of time depending upon your product life cycle, things like that. So over here, the key thing is to remember that, you use your discretion, you use your judgment, and then you make the best call depending upon the problem that you're facing. So now let's talk about the exercise. For this exercise, I want you to focus the sales of a new toothpaste, the USP of which is the use of Ayurvedic herbs, and is priced 5 rupees above the current market leader. Now, there are a few things that you need to remember when approaching this question. A, I don't want your figures to be exact. I don't, if you are saying that the population of the country is, 150 million, I don't really have a problem with that. But try to keep your figures realistic. and just use your best judgment. You don't have to be exact down to the decimal point. It's okay to go for 5% or 10% instead of an exact 7%. What I'm looking at is how you approach this question. As you can know, as you can see, this is a guesstimate question, which is the end all be all of a management education. So approach this question, put down your answers in the comments, and then we'll discuss this one in the next lecture. So I hope that was fun. We'll come back to the question in the next lecture when we'll be talking about the exact methodology or the algorithm that you use to estimate sales potential. And share the video if you guys liked it, and I'll see you soon.